Happy Monday, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. This is the first meta review for the best of one, best of three standard for the through the Omenpaths or Spider-Man and paper. Um, so if you're new here, what I do every week is I talk about the top 8 performing decks according to Untapped, which is a third-party tracker. I have decided to keep it diamond and above. There might be some archetypes that you're familiar with that don't show up on here, but I think after due consideration, I think it is better to focus on specifically what's happening on the higher side of the ladder. Keep that in mind, though, that your meta will depend on where you are in the ladder. One example that I'll give really quickly is that last season or last set during Edge of Eternities, I was talking a lot about Boros Burn, and it is a counter to Jeskai Artifacts. And the more that you're coming up against mono white life gain, then the worse that Boros Burn is going to perform. And the lower you are down on the ladder, the more mono white life gain you're going to face. And the counter to mono white life gain is Jeskai Artifacts. So you kind of just, have to play with what you're experiencing on the ladder and go from there. So I will do my best to give you all the tools that you need to successfully climb into the Mythic top 250. And then we'll also talk about best of 3 in case you are a veteran and, planning for an RCQ and going for more of the competitive side of Magic the Gathering. So with that, let's get started. So first, number 1, according to Untapped, for Diamond and above, was Sultai Reanimator. It is a new archetype coming from the Through the Omen path, built around the Cavaero Mind Bitten, which I talked about during the early performers yesterday on Sunday. So it is in Tier 1. It had 1,100 matches last week in Diamond for a 58.4% win rate. And it's too early for matchup data, so I will let you guys know how that kind of performs as the week goes on. The other thing to keep in mind, too, is that be careful when you're crafting. If you are a beginner, I highly recommend that you wait until week 3 to figure out what you want to craft, because although this is the number 1 deck this week, does not guarantee that it will be in the following weeks. The opening hand, I do want to give you guys just some, I guess, the general strategy for it, right? You're trying to discard one of your payoffs like Vein Ripper or the Bringer of the Last Gift into your graveyard. You can also mill it with Overlord of the Baelmerk or Town Greeter. The Scan the Clouds instant side of the Adventurer. You're just trying to get these cards into the graveyard so that you can then copy it with Cavaero. And then because it is cast, it actually triggers the Bringer. Bringer's usually not something you can reanimate with your typical way of going about it, because then the creature isn't cast, but this one would be. So that's kind of the cool little interaction there, is you can get a little bit more power out of your Bringer of the Last Gift. Awaken of the Honored Dead also lets you use removal, but then gets you that kind of enabling your graveyard. We've got a Sweeper with Harvester of Misery, and yeah, it's kind of, I guess this Whale of Forgotten can also be used as a way to disrupt your opponent, discard, put stuff into your graveyard. So that's number 1. The opening hand, you're looking for Cavaero Mind Bitten. It's kind of like your combo piece, right? So it's similar to like Abuelo's Awakening before rotation. Good to have this one in your opening hand if it's the point of the deck. And then you want your payoffs, so like Bringer of the Last Gift is good to have in your opening hand so you can discard it. Awaken the Honored Dead is a really good one to have in your opening hand because it slows your opponent down while also enabling your combo. And then Town Greeter is your cheapest way to enable your combo, so I look for that one in my opening hand as well. Okay, number 2 is Jeskai Artifacts, and this one is in Tier 2, so it's a standard deviation below the Sultai Reanimator. It had 9,800 matches in the last week with 56.1% win rate. So we can see a substantial chunk of the meta is made up of the Jeskai Artifacts. There are no changes to the top performing most popular list since week 6 of Edge of Eternities. So last time I covered this archetype. There is matchup data for Jeskai Artifacts, though, so it is favored, which means a 55% or above win rate against mono white life gain and mono black demons. It is a favored coin flip, meaning somewhere between 50 and 55% against mono red aggro. And then no unfavorable coin flips. It is weak, meaning 45% or lower against Boros Burn and Azorius Control. So if the whole meta in the top half is made up of Jeskai Artifacts, you're going to see more Boros Burn and Azorius Control being used to counter Jeskai Artifacts. The opening hand, you're looking for the Authority of the Consuls. If you're running it, not all versions of Jeskai Artifacts are running this card. United Battlefront enables your combo. Clay Fired Bricks and the Simulacrum Synthesizer. Things are looking okay right now for combo control. Number 3, also in Tier 2. And by the way, anything above a 50% win rate, you can take to Mythic. So all of these are very viable. Boros Burn is number 3 in Tier 2 with 7,800 matches in the last week for a 56.1% win rate. And there are no changes as well to this list from week 6 of Edge of Eternities. So it's favored against Jeskai Artifacts. It's a good one to counter that strategy. It's a favored coin flip against mono red aggro and Azorius Control, and then it's unfavored coin flip against mono black demons, but it is weak against mono white life gain. So that's what I was saying. If you are coming up against a lot of mono white life gain, and you're in gold, Boros Burn is going to perform worse than later in the ladder. Opening hand, you're looking for the Sheltered by Ghosts, the Hired Claw, the Screaming Nemesis, and the Slick Shot Show Off. Number 4 is Azorius Control, and this one also is in Tier 2 with 3,300 matches for a 55.9% win rate. And no changes since the last week of Edge of Eternities. And it is favored against mono white life gain, Jeskai Artifacts, and mono green landfall. It's a favored coin flip against mono black demons, unfavored coin flip against mono red aggro, and weak to Boros Burn. The opening hand, you're looking for No More Lies. It's nice to get that early disruption. Same if you're running the Seam Rip, it's nice to have this for the early aggression. I've talked about this one before too, but the having your Elspeth Stormslayer, having your win condition in your hand is a nice one to have in your starting hand. Beza, if you're running it, the Bounding Spring is a good one to help stabilize against aggro, but also can help you draw against control and has good versatility. Ultima or the Day of Judgment, some form of sweeper is nice to have in your opening hand, and then 3 steps ahead for following up with counterspell to your opponent's first 2 plays is pretty nice. And then number 5, according to Untapped in Tier 2, is 4-color control. This one has 2,400 archetype matches and a 55.2% win rate. So it's kind of like the same Azorius Control, but you're bringing in red, and there's some pretty tasty spell payoffs for bringing in red, making it better against the creature-based decks, less so maybe against the combo decks that aren't developing on the board for a little bit. But either way, you can disrupt counterspell their play when they go to reanimate things from the graveyard. So this one has less of a creature-based win condition and more of just direct burn through our red burn spells. So it's a new archetype in the sense that I haven't talked about it in the top 8 during Edge of Eternities, although it was around and available. Yeah, so basically similar strategy: disrupt your opponent, destroy your opponent's plays, and then win via burn. So we see this one a little bit more in best of 3 than we do in best of 1, but it's a fun best of 1 deck as well. So it's favored against mono white life gain and Jeskai Artifacts, and it is a coin flip against mono red aggro. And your opening hand, you're looking for No More Lies, you're looking for Day of Judgment if you're running it, Ultima, Lightning Helix, and Stock Up works okay in this one, as well as like Fire Magic, just like early disruptors, similar strategy to Jeskai Control. Sorry, it is Jeskai. I guess it's got the black in it. 4-color control is similar to Azorius Control. Number 6 is Gruul Landfall, and this one was also in Tier 2 with 3,200 matches and 55.1% win rate last week in Diamond and above. It's a favored coin flip against Jeskai Artifacts and mono green landfall. It's a coin flip against mono black demons. It's weak against mono white life gain, mono red aggro, and Boros Burn. So opening hand, you're looking for the Mosswood Hydra, the Llanowar War Elves, Saw's Chocobo, and Bristly Bill Spinesower. We talked about this one a fair amount in the previous meta. And then coming in at number 7 is a new archetype. So this one's Mono Blue Tempo. It had 1,600 matches for a 55% win rate. And the card that's bringing life into this is the Bellion the Parched. Talked about this one yesterday as well in the early performers video. And I meant to get to that one earlier than Sunday, so I apologize. But anyway, this one, it's cool because it's ramp, right? If you've cast it gets +1/+1 as a creature if you cast a blue spell. And then at the beginning of your end step, you untap it and turn it into a land. So it can help ramp, especially because all of this deck is designed on playing cards on your opponent's turn. So as long as you are doing that, then it's only a land during your opponent's turn. So I guess the only card that doesn't have flash is the Spyglass Siren. But yeah, you're trying to get in, use the evasive flyers to give you the card draw for the Enduring Curiosity, and then disrupt your opponent's plays with things like the Flood Pit's Drowner, the Spell Stutter, that sort of thing. Bounce off of Into the Floodmaw, etc. Okay, and then Mono Red Aggro is number 8, and this one was 1,800 matches for a 54.6% win rate. No changes from the last week of Edge of Eternities, and is a is favored against Izzet Prowess, coin flip against Mono Black Demons, and an unfavored coin flip against Jeskai Artifacts. And it's weak against Mono White Life Gain and Boros Burn. The upside to running something like the Mono Red Aggro and why it can be in the top 8, even though it doesn't have the best spread of the known meta, is that if there's a whole bunch of people who are exploring new stuff at the beginning of a set, you can be really high scoring in the other category, right? So that's where Mono Red is preying on all of the people who are dirtling around trying to figure out what to play, and it's not performing very well against the known archetypes except for Izzet Prowess. So the opening hand, you're looking for your Hired Claw. This is a really great one to start on turn 1. Screaming Nemesis is really nice, especially against other mono red decks. If you're running the Burnout Bastronaut, that one's good to have. Emberheart Challenger as well. Nice one to have in your opening hand. And the Razorkin Needlehead if you're running it. And then Shock is a nice way to disrupt the other Slickshot show-off decks. It's nice to have your Shock or your Burst Lightning. All right, so now for best of 3, we got 10 different archetypes to talk about. Just because I will save the best for last. The Sunday tournament I think was the most interesting. So we did also have the Pro Tour in Atlanta, but that was mostly modern. So we'll be keeping things about standard here. And so this is Izzet Cauldron by Gitaxian Probe. Took down first place on Friday. Went 8-1, and if we compare this one to the last week of Edge of Eternities, we can see that they dropped in a Braid, Steam Core Scholar, Starting Town, a Mountain, 2 Soulstone Sanctuaries, and a Broadside Barrage to bring in a 3rd copy of Torch the Tower, 2 Quantum Riddlers, which is good for the mirror match, 2 Islands, and then 2 of the Multiversal Passage, which I talked about during week 0. As you know, through the rabbit hole, like this one's going to be decent fixing until we get the full set of Pain lands. So the best of 3 sideboard also got a tweak with -1 Spell Pierce, -1 Fire Mage, down a Quantum Riddler, down a Broadside Barrage to bring in a Braid. Obviously, that one's good against the mirror match to get rid of the Agatha's Soul Cauldron. We're bringing in an Essence Scatter to basically counter the Quantum Riddlers, and then 2 Obliterating Bolts. And this one's nice for against like Dimir Midrange if you have some sort of threat that you need to get rid of that benefits off of the exile. So Enduring Curiosity, that sort of thing. And then second place was taken down by Dimir Midrange by O. Daniel Akos, who's a familiar name if you follow the standard challenge on Magic the Gathering Online. They went 5-3, and we have to go back to week 5 of Edge of Eternities since we talked about Dimir Midrange, but this one dropped Phantom Interference and a Starting Town and a Lord Skitter, and brought in Essence Scatter, so different counterspell of choice. Brought in the Multiversal Passage instead of the Starting Town, and then instead of Lord Skitter, we're running a Preacher of the Schism. A little bit less graveyard hate, but this one's good against the aggro matchups. And then in the sideboard, we also dropped a Strategic Betrayal, which is the edict that attacks the graveyard, and we dropped a Preacher of the Schism, which has been moved to the main. And instead, we've got the Lord Skitter in the sideboard, if we need to bring this in to hate on the graveyard against like Izzet Cauldron. But then we've also got the Karsi Revenant for against the aggro matchup with the life gain. So we still have, same amount of graveyard hate, just in different forms. And the same amount of like anti-aggro in different forms with the Karsi Revenant versus the Preacher. Okay, so the second version of Izzet Cauldron was by Deathmax, and this was also on Friday's tournament. Went 7-1, and if we compare this one to Gitaxian Probe, we can see that they dropped a Steam Core Scholar into the Floodmaw, and Marauding Mako, Wild Ride, 2 Starting Towns, and the 2 Multiversal Passages to bring in an Abrade, Thundering Falls, Storm Chaser's Talent. So this is like, we see this a little bit more in like the Izzet Prowess build instead of the Izzet Cauldron build, but it can be nice for recurring some of your spells and such, as well as just giving you the general Prowess theme. Soulstone Sanctuary, 3rd copy of Quantum Riddler, and then an Island and a Mountain. The sideboard we dropped 2 Quantum Riddlers and a Braid, Torch the Tower, and Fire Magic to bring in a Spell Pierce, 3 copies of Unable to Scream. This one is because what we are seeing is Izzet Cauldron was the most popular, followed by Dimir Midrange, and then it switched into mono red aggro by Sunday, right? So like Friday, it was Izzet Cauldron. Saturday, I think it was Dimir Midrange. It might have been just the first tournament. And then by Sunday night, it was like 30% of the meta was mono red. So Unable to Scream is nice for against like Screaming Nemesis and such. And then we have a Magic Damper to catch our opponents off guard, being able to protect our Vivi. And speaking of mono red, here is mono red by Pedra Stone. Took down first place on the 26th and went 7-2. And took down second place, went 7-2. And if we compare this one to the second version that we covered in week 6, so at the end of Edge of Eternities, everything was starting to look a little bit more mono red. And this one is the version that's bringing in the Scalding Viper for the Ojer Exonal kind of combo. So this one dropped 3 Mountains, an Obliterating Bolt, Tersa Light Shatter, 2 Fire Annihilations to bring in an additional Spire Bluff Canal, and then the 2 Lightning Strikes for just direct damage, 2 Rockface Villages to give things haste, and then the 4th copy of the Nova Hellkite. And the best of 3 sideboard, we've got 1 less Sunspine Links, 3 Magebane Lizards have been dropped, 3 Fire Magics, 1 Vengeful Possession, 1 Chandra Spark Hunter, and 1 Nova Hellkite. And instead we're bringing in a Shock. 4 Obliterating Bolts for that Dimir Midrange spike that we were talking about, and then the 3 copies of the Stingerback Terror, giving you a nice flying threat that gets around the dealing 5 damage of the Barrage and Izzet Cauldron, or the Scorching Shot, that we see in a lot of decks, the 5 damage hate. I thought this one was really cool. We've got Izzet Prowess by Ms. Lizzie. Took down first place on the September 27th, went 8-1, and it's got enough that I'm going to say it's a new archetype, although it's a lot of familiar faces, right? So we've seen Izzet Prowess, and that's kind of the version that's running the 1-2 in the main. Sometimes they have a Cauldron in the sideboard, but it's way to denote that it's not the 4 copies of Cauldron build, and it's leaning more heavily into the Prowess build, and playing out almost more like more centered on the Prof's Eidectic Memory as a tempo deck. And so this one was, is neat. We're seeing the Gobin Gene Splice variant, Savant, can't be blocked. And when it deals combat damage, you connive. So it's a good way to fill your graveyard for the Agatha's Soul Cauldron. And then it is also bringing in black. So technically this is more of a Grixis Prowess build. But it allows you to transform this into a 3/3 Flying Menace. Spells you cast from your graveyard cost 2 less to cast, and then each non-land card in your graveyard has Mayhem. The Mayhem cost is equal to its mana cost. So you can kind of do some of the... take advantage of the discard, allows you to then take advantage of the Mayhem. We've got the Quantum Riddlers for against the Mirror Match, Vivi's, Winter Night Stories, a lot of familiar faces, right? The Thundertrap Trainer, you've got the Splash Portal, to be able to bounce things like your Thundertrap Trainer, which then helps you dig for additional spells. So we've seen Thundertrap Trainers come in more commonly back during Final Fantasy, during the Pro Tour, if I remember correctly. And then I haven't seen the Splash Portals before. But it's kind of cool, because like you can exile it and bring it back, and it draws a card if you're doing Quantum Riddler. It doesn't matter that it's a Sphinx, right? You draw a card if you're doing the Trainer, just giving you some additional value. So that's the 3 sideboard. Kind of your typical spread. So we've got Annuls for against the Artifact and Enchantment hate, Spell Pierce for against Wraths, Unable to Scream for against Mono Red, Thunder Magic for Go Wide, Torch the Tower for against Aggro, Disdainful Stroke against the, Quantum Riddlers, anything doing the Warp, or back in the day, you could do it against the Overlords. Obliterating Bolt for Dimir Midrange, the 3rd copy of Agatha's Soul Cauldron if they're not good at targeting that, and then you've got the Chandra Spark Hunter, which is also good against Wraths, since Wraths don't hit Planeswalkers. Okay, so this is the second version of Mono Red Aggro, also by Pedra Stone, playing on the following day, got second place with a 7-2, and if we compare it to their previous list, they dropped in a Braid, an Obliterating Bolt, and a Shock to bring in 3 Magebane Lizards. This is all occurring in the sideboard. The main list is exactly the same. The Magebane Lizard being able to punish the decks that are playing multiple spells in one turn. Orzhov Pixie, or Orzhov Self-Bounce, which it is also known as by MJ23, took down first place on Saturday's other tournament, and if we compare this one to Orzhov Pixie in Week 6 of Edge of Eternities, it's a very similar list. We dropped one Elspeth Stormslayer and one Archenemy's Charm, which is the triple black, and we brought in 2 Overlord of the Baelmerks. And in the best of 3 sideboard, we have one less Beza, one less Pinnacle Starcage, which is the temporary lockdown replacement, one less Get Lost, and 2 less Shoot the Sheriffs. And we're bringing in 2 Tiny Bone Joins Up as a way to hate on our opponent's hand. There is already one in the main, but if your opponent is playing something like a mid-range or control list that doesn't have as much things to blow up with your creature-based removal, you can then switch this over to attacking their hand. And then we've got the Unholy Annex. Similarly, like if you're up against something that you need to outvalue, the Unholy Annex can help you with the card draw. And then we have and damage-based removal, right? Like if they're bad at the X equals 6, sometimes the 6/6 flyer can be difficult for something like mono red to deal with. And then we have 2 Authority of the Consuls, which you'll bring in against aggro. All right, we've got the Dimir Midrange by El Cuckoo or Kukui standard challenge on the second place, 6-2 on Saturday's second tournament. And if we compare this one to the Dimir Midrange list by O. Daniel Akos, we actually see a pretty substantial change. So this one is dropping like a Tishana's Tidebinder, Shoot the Sheriff, Essence Scatter, Fountain Port, Fabloom Trick, dropping all 4 copies of the Deep Cavern Bat, as well as 2 copies of the Starting Town, to bring in a 3rd copy of the Preacher of the Schism, again, better against aggro, better since we're seeing more mono red, which Dimir Midrange can struggle against. When you see a lot of mono red, you then start to see more Preacher of the Schism, usually 3 copies of Kaido instead of 4, that sort of thing. And again, we've talked about that one a lot. Bringing in a Restless Reef to help extend the Manland kind of late game strategy, and bringing in a Phantom Interference over the Essence Scatter, bringing in 4 copies of the Azure Beastbinder. And I think there's some really cool synergies being done with this as well, more attention to this, right? So it does affect your ability to, you can disable the Izzet Cauldron, I think is a nice upside to the Azure Beastbinder. We've also see Stab coming in here for against the aggro matchups. Again, this is like, how do we survive mono red as Dimir Midrange? We've also got Strategic Betrayal to hate on the graveyard, and then 2 Multiversal Passages, so a total of 3, to just help the mana base be more diverse. The best of 3 sideboard also got us a tweak, so we were down a Duress, a Fabloom Trick, a Null, Negate, Lord Skitter, Stab, and Tragic Trajectory to bring in a Disdainful Stroke. Good against the Quantum Riddlers. Spell Pierce, I like these against the cheaper Wraths, right? Like when your opponent is going to bring in something like the Pinnacle Starcage, then the Spell Pierce is better early on when they can't pay the 2. And then we've got 2 Essence Scatters in the main if they're playing a creature-based strategy. Elegy Acolyte is a nice stabilizing force on turn 4 if you can survive to then. And then we've got the 0-point Ballad, which also helps punish the creature-based strategies with a Wrath. Okay, number 17 is Selesnya Kona by Melissing Out. And the standard challenge, first place on Sunday, went 7-2. And we've seen we've seen this, I think, more commonly in best of 1, surprisingly. At least that's where I saw it first, right? Was people trying to figure out how to utilize some of the like the stationing effect off of your planets or off of your spacecraft to be able to tap Kona. To then, we see this in like Kona Omniscience in blue. This one instead, though, is trying to cheese out something that just kind of wins on the spot when you play it. So Overlord of the Mistmoors, Knights of the Round, Bahamut, just something that gives you a lot of value for when it enters. And then if they're able to destroy your enchantments that are super busted, then you can bring them back into play with Yuna with a finality counter on it. Esper Origins helps, gives you some life gain. You can also do the Smuggler's Surprise as another way to cheat out some of these threats. And then we've got High Noon, which can just single-handedly destroy certain strategies, right? A little bit of ramp, that sort of thing. You know, just enable the graveyard, play something cool. Yeah. So anyway, I should say that, yeah, anyway, Sunday's tournament had 2 new archetypes, which is really fun to see, right? And so I'm glad to see week 1 starting off on the foot of, hey, let's see some squirrely stuff. So thank you, Melissing Out, for bringing this list. And the best of 3 sideboard, we have the 2 additional copies of High Noon if we're against a spell that similar to like the Lizard, where you'd punish anything doing multiple spells in one turn. Get Lost gives you some Planeswalker hate. Split Up gives you some early aggro creature based. If they're an early aggro creature based strategy, bring in the Split Ups. Elspeth Stormslayer helps out if you're up against something else that's good at destroying creatures. This one then gives you an alternative win condition. Seam Rip for against aggro. Voice of Victory for against Dimir Midrange, so you can get rid of the flash aspect of them playing spells during your turn. And then we have the Heritage Reclamation for the artifact and enchantment hate. All right, and then last but not least is Dimir Control. This one was by Mammy. Took down second place with a 6-3. And we haven't talked about this one either, so this is relatively new. It's not totally new. It's been around, right? It's like Dragon Control, just not playing all of the dragons that we saw back during Tarkir Dragonstorm. So disrupt your opponent's plays, you know, hit them with the 3 steps ahead. Hit them with a Dispelling Exhale, which has the dragon synergies. This one isn't playing the black dragon that we saw with the Wrathing Exhale, but you know, we've got Durgar Island Dragon, tap up to 1 target creature, draw a card, and then we've got the Meringue River Regent, which allows you to bounce as well as pull into additional wraths and such. So Deadly Cover Up, being able to sweep the board. The end is pretty nice if you're up against something like Vivi, right? Or if you can just exile Vivi from their deck, they're going to struggle quite a bit. But same with like hitting. There's a couple of good targets for the end, right? Like you could hit Enduring Curiosity and Dimir, you could hit Kaido and Dimir, that sort of thing. Graveyard Hate with Strategic Betrayal, removal with Long Goodbye, Feed the Cycle, Bitter Triumph, card advantage with Consult the Star Charts, and then the removal with Caustic Exhale too. So it's kind of like what has the what is Dimir Dragon Control turned into, and this is it. Sideboard, we've got Unable to Scream against mono red. We've got Duress for against other control matchups. Stab against aggro. Strategic Betrayal for Graveyard Hate. Gumdrop Poisoner for against aggro as well. Stab against aggro. Negate against control. Preacher of the Schism against aggros. And then the Oil Deep Gear Hulk, being able to attack your opponent's hand. Usually you bring this in against a deck that has less creature-based threats. I guess the lifelink you could bring. Okay, maybe that's not. I stand corrected because it does make them discard, but then they draw again. Maybe the Oil Deep Gear Hulk is better against the aggro matchups because of the lifelink. Anyway, let me know what you like to bring in the Oil Deep Gear Hulk for. And thanks for listening to my ramblings. I hope they find you well. I hope it helps you understand what's going on in the meta if you've been away from Magic for a little bit. There's always somebody who hasn't been around and is thankful for the kind of spread of what's going on. I try to keep everything as informational as possible, so if you're asking like why didn't we see something like Temur Battlecrier, it's because it wasn't a tournament winner in the best of 3 tournaments, or it wasn't in the top 8 according to the tracker. Not that it's a bad deck. And yeah, thanks for being a part of my community. If you want to help support me, the best way to do that is by becoming a YouTube member. You can do that for as much as $25 a month. You can do that for as little as $2 a month, something like that. And helps support me, keeps my energy going so that I keep providing you this information every week and hopefully saving you all some time. Again, so tomorrow, I'm trying to figure out, so week 3 is when we'll be doing the community deck tech. So next week, the submissions will be open for the community deck tech, and then we'll get to them week 3. On Sunday, I will do my best to talk about anything that wasn't talked about in this video, right? Like if we see some stuff that is consistently hitting into Mythic, I will do my best to talk about it on Sunday. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out into the comments below. I do my best to respond to each one. So have a great day. Have fun with Through the Omenpaths, and I will catch you all on Sunday.